Welcome to part 13 of creating visual movie effects in Blender. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to create this Lightsaber Duel. As you can see, we've got a lot going on here. We've got lightsaber effects going on, we've got flashes whenever the two lightsabers collide, and we've got some digital color grading as well on the final video. For this project, I'm going to be using a video that I shot handheld with my cell phone. Me and a couple of coworkers went out just behind our work, and we filmed ourselves playing with lightsabers. So to start off, we're going to take that video file and we're going to split it up very quickly using Blender into a sequence of JPEG still image files, which Blender uses a lot better than raw video files. So let's go ahead and jump in. Of course, if you like this video, if you learned something, go ahead and click on that like button. And if you want to see more videos like this one in Blender and in Tech, click on that subscribe button as well. It really helps the channel out. Just a note here that I actually recorded this tutorial, part 13, and the next one, part 14, in one long take. It's going to be the same project continued in part 1 and part 2 of this little mini series of how to create a lightsaber duel. In this tutorial, we'll be creating the basic lightsaber effect that actually follows along with the plastic toy lightsabers in the video. So we'll have a pretty complete effect almost in this tutorial. In the next one, in part 14, we'll be finishing it off so lightsaber blades can actually go behind other things. Like when a lightsaber goes behind somebody's head or somebody's arm, it doesn't show through. We'll also be adding those yellow flashes when the lightsabers clash. We'll also be creating a digital color grading effect as well, again in the next part. So let's go ahead and click on the splash screen to get rid of it. And I'm going to change our large 3D viewport window into a video sequence editor window. That's what that button down there, of course. This video sequence editor window is like a movie editor. You've got a timeline with tracks, but we can actually press this little button down here that has a little checkerboard and tracks on it, so we can have the video window and tracks. And let's go ahead down to the add menu, and I'm going to add a movie file, and on my desktop I'm going to find that movie file and click add movie strip. That will add it onto the timeline, and if I scroll down or up, you can see that it'll zoom out on the timeline, and I can scroll up or down with my mouse in this window to make that video bigger. And I've got two tracks here. This one is the audio track, so I think if I right click to select it and press X and then click on erase strips, I can get rid of it. It won't hurt because we're not going to use any of the original audio because when you're fighting with lightsabers, you tend to actually make the lightsaber sounds with your mouth anyways, which isn't exactly helpful. And so I can drag this green bar and scrub through and find where I want to keep this footage. We're not going to use the whole thing. In fact, I'm just going to use my arrow keys on my keyboard. I happen to know that I want to start right on that frame. So I'm going to cut off the beginning, and what I can do is I can either right click on this little arrow on the side of the clip and press G. That will let me grab that end. You have to right click on that little triangle and press G. Then I'll move the end up to there and click. If I undo that though, you can also, with Command Z, you can also right click on the clip, and then wherever your green bar is, you can press K for the knife tool, and that will cut that clip into two. I call it a soft cut actually. So now I can just select that end clip and press X on my keyboard and click on erase strips. And I'm going to grab, by right clicking the rest of the clip, and press G and move it down to, I'll start at frame 1 there. You can see that it said 1 when I grabbed it, and I want to put it right there. And how long is this clip? Well, by default, the video sequence editor in your scroll bar shows seconds. So that's 1 second, 2 seconds, all the way up to about 8 seconds or so. But I would rather see frames there. So if I go to the view menu, I can uncheck show seconds. In fact, I think I forgot to change my user preferences so everything isn't too small on my screen. Sorry about that. Where is that interface, and then scale? Let's try 1.3. I think they've changed things recently, and I'll save my settings there. Okay, hopefully that's a bit easier for you to see. So it shows the second markers, which isn't very helpful. So if I go to view and uncheck show seconds, or just click on that, it'll show me frames. And I'm only going to use 100 frames for this example because it takes a long time to make lightsabers. So for the sake of this video, I'll stick to 100, okay? So what I need to do now is export this to a folder of JPEG images. So over here in the Properties window, under the Camera tab, first I have to change my video resolution or my output resolution to match the original movie resolution. And I happen to know that this was shot with an iPhone and it was shot at 1920 by 1080, but not 50% of that width and height. So I'll change that up to 100. That's the actual resolution. And it used 29.98 frames per second. That's fine. That's what I shot it at. And we're going to output all this to a folder on my desktop. So I'll click on this little folder icon and I'll go to my desktop, and I don't have a good folder for all those frames on my desktop. So I'll click on this little new folder button and I'll type Saber Duel Frames. I'll press enter and I'll click on that name once. So now this is where I am in this top bar, and this is going to be the beginning of all the, or this in the second bar is where all the names or the base of the name for all of the images will be in the image sequence, but they'll all have a number at the end of it. If you leave this blank, all the images will just be numbered in their file names, and that's okay with me. So I'll click on accept, and I only want to render out 100 frames, so I've got start and end 100. I'm going to render out to not PNG images, I'll just use compressed images. JPEG images are fine. PNG images are compressed, but they're higher quality, but they take up much more room in your computer and in RAM, so we'll just use JPEGs at 95% quality. So now I can go ahead and press animation. It will render out quite quickly all the frames because it's not doing any 3D rendering, it's just, you know, outputting frames of video to files on your computer. And so now I can go ahead and close Blender, and I don't really need to save this. And then on my desktop, I've got that folder full of those image files. So let's go ahead now and reopen up Blender. It's time to start making some effects. For this, we do not need a 3D viewport. We're not going to do any 3D at all. What we do need are a couple of windows. We need the node editor window. So let's go ahead and get that on our screen. I'll change this window into a node editor. And I'm not going to be doing or using material nodes. I'm going to be using compositing nodes. And that's what those two little stacked photographs are. And I'm going to click on use nodes and backdrop. Sure. So when you're doing compositing in Blender, it kind of assumes that you're going to be using 3D from your 3D viewport scene, and that's what this render layers node is for, and we're not going to use that, but what it's connected to is something that we do have to keep. We have to keep this composite. This composite node is how you are able to finish your final composite. You have to have this one in order for you to render out a final video or image sequence of your scene. So I'm going to right click to select this node, and if you're not familiar with this node editor window, you can scroll up and down to zoom in and out. You can hold your mouse wheel down like a button, and then just like you're orbiting, you can pan around, and you can right click to select nodes. You can tap G to select nodes. If you tap R, it doesn't do anything, doesn't rotate a node. But if you have multiple nodes selected by holding the shift key, you can rotate the whole group of selected nodes. Okay, so I'm going to select, right click on that node and press X, and I'm going to bring in that image sequence. So I'll press Shift A on my keyboard. I'm going to input an image, so input image. That was again Shift A on my keyboard to bring up the add menu, input image, and then I'll put that right there, and we're going to connect our image to our final composite because we want the video to go and be in our final project. So now I have to go to open, and on my desktop I'm going to go to that Saber Duel Frames folder, and I'll press A on my keyboard with my mouse in this area, and that will select all of the images. That's the A key, and I'll click on open images. So now I've got that video file and it'll render out. If I click on if I'm not on frame 0 but on some other frame from 1 to 100 and I press render, it'll get the video, but it's cropped right now, and that's again because of this 50% setting. It's the right resolution, but I'll turn it up, and if I click render, I get that frame of my movie, okay? If you click animation, it'll output again to PNGs. What we want to do now is we want to make a mask, because if I look at one of the lightsabers. In fact, what I'll do is I'll bring a background of our video into this window. To do that, I'm going to hold Shift on my keyboard and left click and drag through one of these noodles. And when you left click and drag while holding Shift, it will add one of these little splitter nodes, which you can split a path, kind of like a fork in the road, to two different outputs. We're going to add a second output. We're going to add a viewer, and I actually forget how to add or where you find viewers, although you could search. I'm just going to hold Control and Shift and left click on this little splitter. Control, Shift, and left click. And there we go. What it actually did, I'm going to hide the backdrop, is it added a viewer. Okay, a viewer node is what you need in order to have this backdrop work. If you check this backdrop, it won't work unless you have a viewer. Okay, that viewer is kind of your way of getting the backdrop. The backdrop is a pretty good size, but if I tap V on my keyboard, I can shrink the backdrop. If I tap Alt V, they're kind of weird keyboard shortcuts, I can grow it, and if I hold the Alt key on my keyboard, Alt, and then I can orbit, and that will, with my middle mouse wheel button pressed down, that will move it around. So V, Alt V, and then Alt, and then my middle mouse button to move it around. So I might move it over here for now. We need a mask, because the way that we're going to make this lightsaber effect work is by actually going frame by frame, unfortunately, over the lightsaber. But don't worry, it's not very hard at all. It's just a rectangle, really. So what we need to do is make another window. We're going to grab this little triangle crosshatched area and drag it straight down. And in this top window, I'm going to get a movie clip editor window, and I'm going to replace that window with the movie clip editor window. And then it won't show me anything that I've opened down here in the node editor window, because this is an image sequence. So I'll go to Open, and on my desktop, I'll open that same set of lightsaber frames. Again, that's the A key when you're in that folder, and I'll open that clip. And so I am on frame 21 right now. Maybe I'll back up a little bit so we get to frame 18. I'll tell you why that number is a good number in a few minutes. And I'm going to zoom in, and again, if you orbit, you can pan around when you've zoomed in. That's just your middle mouse button again. And while holding it down, you can move your mouse. So I'm going to do this red lightsaber mask first. And so in order to make a mask in this movie clip editor window, I'm going to switch away from tracking mode into mask mode. And when you're in mask mode, you can see all the masks in your scene. We don't have any. That's what this little list would show me. So I'll click on New, and I'm going to name this mask red, because I'm going to work with the red lightsaber. You don't have to make this lightsaber red, but it will name it red because that's the color that it is in the video. So to make a mask for this scene, we're going to hold the Control key down on the keyboard, and I'm going to left click to place a point. I'm going to put it right on the four corners roughly of this lightsaber. So right there roughly, while holding Control, hold Control and click right there. And then this is rounded, but I can just go maybe cut off the very top. You'll see why in a sec. And then one right there, still holding Control down. And then I want to close this rectangle shape, but I'm not going to click again. What I'll do instead is go to Mask and toggle Cyclic, and that will close the mask off. So now I have a lightsaber shape, although maybe it's not quite as rounded as you would want. So what I can actually do is zoom way in so it's really big. And if I just left click and drag in the middle of one of these edges of the mask, it will bend out. And then you get these single Bezier curve handles that you can tweak, but you can always just, if you're zoomed in close enough, you can just drag the actual edge of the mask itself, and you can tweak it, maybe make it a bit more rounded that way, and that way, you know, it just looks a bit better. And if, you know, this end of the lightsaber is actually rounded in that way, so I'll just do the same thing there. Maybe I'll move these ones farther down and do that. So that looks pretty good to me. The next step is to actually make the lightsaber effect, and this is where we're going to get a little bit crazy with nodes. So what I'm actually going to do here is split this window into two, left and right, so we can have it just the lightsaber show up with our background on the right hand side, then work with nodes without a backdrop on the left hand side. So I'm going to grab this little triangle crosshatch area and drag it to the left, and these are two of the same node windows now, but I can uncheck backdrop over here so we can see the nodes clearly, and I'll get rid of this sidebar and this one as well, and then I can just move the nodes off to the side, way up out of the frame, and then I can hold Alt and Orbit to kind of zoom in on that lightsaber so you can see. And if I tap Alt V, I can zoom in, and then I can hold Alt and Orbit to pan the view over. So creating a lightsaber, it requires quite a number of nodes, but it's not too complicated once you get used to it. You just kind of have to memorize it. Luckily though, once you create one lightsaber setup, you just duplicate it and then change one or two little things, and you've got a second lightsaber in your scene for the other lightsaber. Okay, so we'll do this once. In order to put something on top of video, you need to use your good old standard alpha over node. So I'm going to press Shift A on my keyboard to bring up the add menu, or go down to add. So Shift A. I'm going to add the color alpha over node. Again, I'm not sure why it's in color, but again, it's alpha over. I'm going to put it right there. And you'll notice that it connects the video to the top image input port on this node, and it outputs it. But when you have just the color in the bottom image, that actually puts this color, or whatever image is plugged into there, above the video. It's kind of backwards. The bottom one is on top. So to fix that, I'm going to make sure that this picture, this color, only shows up where we have that mask, that red lightsaber mask. So we're going to bring the mask in. So I'm going to press Shift A, and it's under Input Mask. And when I bring in a mask, I need to select it. I'm going to make that window smaller just because we don't really need it right now. And I'm going to select the red mask, and I'm going to connect the mask to the factor of this alpha over. And as you can see, we get a very anti-aliased, very jaggy looking white lightsaber, and that's just the beginning of what we're going to do. So now you kind of get an idea of what's happening. But a lightsaber is not just a jaggy, anti-aliased rectangle with some rounded ends. It's got a few layers, and it's got some blurring going on, and it kind of looks like it's glowing because there's a color and there's a white bar in the middle. So we're actually going to use this alpha over, and I'm going to make this window smaller because I want you to be able to see it without squinting and hurting your eyes. By the way, this video should be in 1440p in 60 frames per second on YouTube. So if you're looking at it at a lower resolution and you can't read the text, you can always turn your settings up on YouTube, okay? This alpha over is only going to be the alpha over that connects the entire finished lightsaber blade to the main movie. It's not going to actually add any lightsaber right now, which means that this mask doesn't plug directly into it. So I'm going to hold Control on my keyboard and left click and drag to cut and remove that noodle. Instead, we're going to have another alpha over that actually brings the two halves of the lightsaber together. So I'm going to grab this alpha over, we're going to use it. I'm going to press Shift D on my keyboard with it selected. Shift D duplicates. So I'm going to put another one right up there, and I'm going to connect this one into the bottom port, which means it'll go over top of the video. Okay, so we have this alpha over now that connects the two halves of the lightsaber, but in order to have this effect work, in order to put something over another thing, we're actually going to have an alpha over for each half of the lightsaber that we're going to plug this red mask into. So right now we've got an alpha over, then we have alpha over inception, and now I'm going to make alpha over double inception, as you will. So now I'm going to connect these two alpha overs into the two ports. And here's the thing. We want each one of these alpha overs to create the two different bars. The colored, not bar, but lightsaber blade, and then the white lightsaber blade. And the white lightsaber blade is going to be on top of the colored one, and the colored one is going to be more blurred than the white one. So remember that when you have an alpha over, what's plugged into the bottom port goes on top, and what goes on the top port is underneath. So we're going to make the underneath one the colored part of the lightsaber. So I'm going to change the bottom color on this alpha over to the color that I want for this lightsaber. Brad actually, that one holding the lightsaber, the red lightsaber, requested that you wanted a purple lightsaber blade. So there's purple. Now, we don't want them to be a white background behind the entire lightsaber, so I'm going to change this top input color to black, but then transparent black. That's A stands for alpha. It needs to be transparent and black for this to work. Same thing down here. This is going to be our white lightsaber blade, and we need to have a background of black and transparent in order for this to work. The magic is going to happen here though when I plug the mask into both of these, because right now we have a white scene, and that's because we have our footage, and connected to our footage using alpha over, or on top of the footage, we have whatever this alpha over is doing. And what this alpha over is actually getting two colors, purple and white. And right now there's no mask, so it's just the entire picture, purple and white. If I reverse these two, we'll get all purple. Okay, and these colors don't have anything behind them because they're transparent black. Watch what happens when I plug this mask into both the factor of the white, and then the factor of the purple. Whoops, I made a mistake. I plugged the mask into the image. On this node, it should be into the factor. There we go. We now have a white lightsaber, but we can't see the purple because it's below the white, and it's exactly the same size because it uses exactly the same mask. So now we're going to blur each one in a different amount. So I'm actually going to make a splitter right here because I don't want two noodles coming off of my red mask. So I'm going to hold Shift again and left click and drag, and that will create a splitter node right there, and I'll connect that instead to the factor. So now we've got, one path right there. You'll see why we want this little section later on. And I want to blur each one of these, or the mask, but different amounts for the white and the purple. So I'm going to add a filter. So I'll press Shift A on my keyboard. It's a filter node called blur. And if I put one copy of this blur after the mask before it gets to the purple, I can blur the mask for the purple. And then if I duplicate that mask, Shift D on my keyboard, I'll put it down here, I can blur it less for the white. So let's go ahead and see what happens if I blur the white mask by 5 on the x-axis and 5 on the y-axis. You can see it got blurry, and you can see what happens when I blur the mask that goes into the purple by 25 and 25. We have a glowing lightsaber. Now, we can play with some of these checkboxes. I find that turning on gamma on the blur before the white will make the white too thick, but I think it actually helps with the color. You'll see it makes it brighter. And depending on what the lighting is like and you're seeing how bright it is, depending on the color that you've chosen for your lightsaber, you might think that that looks good. You might try checking these other ones, variable size, relative. It's really up to you, whatever looks best. So if you want to pause the video now, if you didn't get all those nodes, make sure that you have the top and bottom, especially in these two, correct. The top should be transparent black. The bottom is the color that you want. Of course, I can change the color if I want, green. There we go. But Brad wants purple, so we'll leave it at that. Okay, so we have one lightsaber in one frame. Luckily, we don't have to animate or redo this setup for every frame, but we do have to animate the mask. Before I do that though, I'm going to make a second mask for the other lightsaber. This is Noah's green lightsaber, and I'll actually have him have green. So I'm going to go back to my movie clip editor window, and we have this red mask. I'm going to press this plus to make a new mask, and then I'll pan over. I'm still in the same frame 18, by the way. That will not move until we start animating. And so over here, again, with a new mask created with that little plus button, I'm going to call this mask green, and because it's the green lightsaber, and I'll hold Control on my keyboard, and I'll left click once, twice, 3 times, and hold Control still, and 4 times, and again mask toggle cyclic to make it a closed rectangle. And as you can see, it is rounded at the bottom from this direction, so I can just grab the middle of that edge and pull it. If you're not zoomed out enough, it'll think that you mean to grab one of these points. So you got to zoom in quite a lot, especially once you have these little handles here. Okay, so at the top as well, we want to zoom in and grab it like that. Maybe I'll move that down and pull these Bezier curve handles out so then it's more accurately rounded. Okay, so now what I can do, I'll make everything else smaller, is I need to duplicate all of the nodes that make my lightsaber. Well, that means this one. Actually, I'll tap C on my keyboard. The C key, when your mouse is in this window, will let you circle select, and you can scroll up and down to change the size of your circle. I'm just going to paint by left-clicking and dragging to select all of those nodes. I want to just get the ones for this lightsaber. If you middle-click, it'll take away selection, but again, you can middle or left-click, pardon me, to select, and when you're happy with your selection, you can press enter, and that way I just have those nodes selected. By the way, you can rotate these at this point if you want to make them take up less room side to side, so I kind of like that. And then I'm going to duplicate these selected nodes. So I'll press Shift D on my keyboard. They'll duplicate. Again, I might want to click and then rotate a little bit so they all kind of fit nicely. And I'm actually going to move them a little bit, let's say over there, because I'm going to take these, I'm going to hold Shift this time and just select all three of these. I'm going to move them up there. Sometimes you end up going kind of up and to the right if you keep on adding more big kind of branches of nodes and noodles. So I want to join this connecting alpha over to my path. What I can just do is drag this image port into the upper image to go on the bottom or underneath, and I'll connect this one there. So now this is the second lightsaber, and it will be added to the footage as well. It adds the first lightsaber, then it adds the second lightsaber, but the second lightsaber is using the same mask and the same color. I don't want to use the red mask because, as you can see, this isn't showing up yet. And if I go, actually that is the background, I was going to show you the backdrop, but it's the same thing. So I'm going to change this mask to green, and if it might not show up right away, but if I use my arrow keys on my keyboard and go one frame before and then one frame next, I'll just by pressing left and right and then right on my arrow keys, I've got a lightsaber, but it's also purple, so we'll change that color to a greeny yellowy color, and now I've got a greeny yellow lightsaber. Okay, so we have two. There we go. But of course, it's not animated. And if I scrub through, we're on frame 18 now, you need to remember what frame that you're on. It's not going to look too good because those lightsabers are just static. So again, back to frame 18 again. What we have to do is animate the masks, and that's both very easy and very time consuming. So back to our movie editor window, I'm going to animate the red lightsaber first. So I'm going to go to the red mask over here, and there it is. And simply to animate, you need your timeline window up. So this window down here, if you don't have that window, I'll just get rid of it. For some reason, it isn't working. That's a weird little bug. Maybe this window is too narrow. Anyways, you should have a timeline. You should know how to make a timeline in Blender. I'm not sure why that's not working. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, it's because we have two windows side by side here, so we can't merge this one up. I understand. Okay, so in order to animate a mask, you need to turn on your red record button. And once you do that, whenever you move a node or a point or a corner of your mask, it will record that information in its location and maybe even its rotation and scale for the whole mask. I don't know. But it'll record whenever you change a position of one of the node points, including the curves and everything. So right now I don't think that this location on frame 18 actually has any keyframes. So I can press A few times with my mouse in this window, A to select none and then select all, and then I can tap I on my keyboard, and I inserts a keyframe. If you don't believe me, if you actually look on this little blue strip, which is all the frames that you've loaded and shown in this window, this is where your keyframes for your mask will be. So as you can see, if I just go away from that frame 18, there's a little yellowy orange bar right there. That's a keyframe. Unfortunately, mask keyframes don't show up in your timeline, although if I were to make my timeline a bit taller and then split it in two by dragging this little triangle area down, I could go to my, change this window into my dope sheet. So I'll change it to a dope sheet, which is kind of like a more advanced timeline. And then you don't see the keyframes in here either until you change the mode from dope sheet to mask. And now you'll see the keyframes for your existing masks. And right now I've only got one keyframe on my red mask. So that's great. So do you need to animate every single keyframe of your movie? Well, yes and no. This is a very fast-paced scene with lots of really quick movement. So I actually would recommend it for a fast lightsaber fight, animating all the frames. But what I recommend is not to go every single frame. I would start at frame 1. So I'm going to back up to frame 1 here, and I'm going to put the lightsaber in the right spot. So this is not a very hard process. Don't worry about being super accurate, depending on how much of a perfectionist that you are. You can zoom in and you can correct the curve. I would go to the very edge almost of where the red is in your footage, and that looks pretty good to me. We're going to solve this problem in a few minutes about how to occlude the lightsaber when it goes behind somebody's head or arm or another lightsaber. But as you can see right now, it doesn't look too good. It looks like it's in front of his head. But again, we'll fix that in a minute or two, okay? So we have a keyframe on frame 1. What I recommend doing is spacing out your keyframes at first. What I like doing is going every 9 keyframes, because when you have every 9 keyframes, you basically have 7 keyframes that don't have, or 7 slots for keyframes or frames that don't have keyframes in the middle, and then you can go halfway between and do every 4 essentially, and there's a middle nice keyframe to land on, and then you can go in between each and fix each one, and that way you're not having to correct it a whole lot every time. And if you do skipping, then you can get a long way at first and then go back and correct it later. If you have slow lightsaber movement, or just, you know, somebody talking while holding the lightsaber, you could probably get away with only doing every, 2 or 3 keyframes, depending on, again, the motion and how much the lightsaber is moving and wiggling and things like that. So on frame 9, again, I will fix this location. The lightsaber handle is out of view right now, so I can just do it wherever I see it. And what I'm going to do is do maybe one more frame. So I think that's pretty good for now, and I'm going to go to frame 18, and then the next multiple of 9 is 27, and so it's way up there. So what you can actually do here is you can grab the entire mask and rotate it and put it almost in the right spot. So to grab the whole thing, you can tap A a few times to select all of the points. You can tap G to grab, but you'll notice that it will not rotate properly if you tap R. And that's because of this setting right here. This will rotate whatever you have selected in this mask window by the individual origin of each point. But if you rotate each individual origin of each point, you're just rotating each little point where it is. So I don't know why this is the default, but it is. I'm going to change this pivot point from individual origins, which is the default, to median point, which I really think should be the default. And now if you tap R, you can rotate the entire thing. You can put it right there, and I might scale it down a little bit, and I can go over and zoom in. And the more you do this, the faster you will get at it. And I'll put maybe that right there, and I'll go up the top, and we'll do something like that. And again, there is blurriness in the footage and in your lightsaber glowing mask, so as long as it looks good in this window, you are doing good. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause the video, and I'm going to go through, and when I come back, it'll be about 45 minutes to 3 hours from now, and I will have finished all of the animation for the red lightsaber. Alright, so I'm back about 45 to an hour and 10 minutes later. I can do this pretty quickly because I've done a lot of it. So as you can see now, I've got a bunch of keyframes in a row, and I've only gone again from frame 1 to 100. I ended up doing every single frame because, again, of that fast motion. So as you can see, if you watch the outline of the mask, it follows the lightsaber toy quite accurately, and I think I'm going to be happy with it. And you can always pause on any frame and look at the background of your node editor window to see what it looks like. Okay, so guess what? It's time to do the green lightsaber. I'm going to switch over to my green lightsaber, which is only in its position frame 18 right now. So if I go back to frame 18, it will fit. But of course, with the red record button on, I'm going to go back to frame 1, not 0. 0 does not have any video frames on it. It's frame 1, and I'm going to reposition it. So again, you can use the A key to select it all, and then you can rotate and put it down there, and maybe scale it down with the S key, and then start grabbing corners and putting it over the lightsaber as accurately as you can. And you might go back in and touch up the roundness of areas so green parts don't show up. So that looks roughly pretty good to me. Don't worry about if a lightsaber bends and peeks out a little bit. Again, you've got a big glow around it, so it'll be fine. I'm going to pause the video now, and I'm going to get 100 frames completed of the green lightsaber. Alright, so I'm back. I've got the green lightsaber mask animated. If I scrub through my dope sheet, you can see that the outline of the green mask is now following the lightsaber. To be honest with you, I didn't actually spend the last hour or 2 or 3 going over this for either the green or the red. I actually went to File and Append, and I appended a mask from another file that I worked on with the exact same frames, with the exact same video. So I had these masks already animated. You can do that. You can import things from other Blender files. So that's why I have these old ones, which are the ones that you saw me make, and then I've got the green and red new ones that I've created and renamed the old ones and renamed the ones I brought in. Okay, so I've got these masks, and if I stop at any frame, you can see that in my window, hopefully, what, is it not working? Oh, you know what I forgot to do? I imported a different mask, and in my nodes, I'm actually glad that you're seeing this mistake. I've got this green I've got the old green mask in there, so I'll bring the new green mask in there. It was showing the one that I actually created in front of you. So now if I update my frames, if I go to a different frame with my arrow keys on my keyboard, you can see that I've got it working. Okay, so I've got lightsabers. They glow. I could now change my output to a video file format, and I could change my frames from 1 to, in fact, I'll do that now, frame 1 to 100 only. So my end frame will be frame 100, and it'll render that out. Alright, so we're going to pause the video right there and end this tutorial number 13. In the next tutorial, in part 14, we'll continue on and finish this project. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to stop the lightsaber from showing through somebody's head when it's supposed to be behind their head. We'll also be creating those yellow flashes when two lightsabers collide. We'll also be able to sort the lightsabers out so one can go behind the other and then go in front of it later on in the same video. We'll also be adding some color grading in the next tutorial. But that'll be it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, of course, click that like button. If you want to see more videos like this one in Blender and in Tech, click on that subscribe button as well. Check out my Facebook page at facebook.com/borncg. That's where I post updates and news about what I'm working on next. But that'll be it for this one. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.